questions. How do you deal with bias? Because we all personally got bias, and now the group know bias. The most difficult thing I've found, and still find every day of my life, is you want to put something on the table, you haven't got it word perfect, and you haven't quite got the whole concept of work out, but you know you'd like to put on the table to see what the reaction is, knowing that some will think you're going at the person and everything else, which is a whole fold with society at the moment. And I see that as a huge issue. So it's the bias issue, and then how do you do, and should you just be going and put it out and just see what the consequences are? Because until you do, sometimes you'll never get to where you're going to try and get to, either individually or as a group.
So when you say bias, do you mean your human bias to misjudge people based on who you think they are, or?
No, obviously, the way you're brought up and everything else, you end up with some level of bias. Like
yes.
The political journalists, perhaps I'll pick on the ABC, and even though I was on the advisory board for a long time, they seem to think they have the licence to run their point of view as to what policy the country should have, instead of saying I should get all points of view up there, make sure the discussion is wide and broad.
Yeah.
That's the bias I'm talking about.
Yeah. So the thing about bias is we think we're on this mission to get rid of bias, like, you know, diversity and inclusion, it's the greatest thing ever, which it is, it's wonderful, and we need to manage bias and get rid of it. We don't get rid of bias. It is ingrained in our humanity. The best we can do is understand it and work around it. So in terms of the bias question, know that you're all biased, and that is perfectly okay. It means you're human. But the more you understand how that plays out, the better able you are to manage it and make sure you're not led by it unconsciously. And so in order to do that, you want to talk to people who are at the receiving end of it, if that makes sense. So for example, if you're a woman in an industry that's male-dominated, if you're a male and you want to understand male privilege and any potential bias in that aspect, you want to talk to women and say, what's it like for you here as a woman in this room, in this conversation? You've been the only woman the whole time. What's been your experience? I'm curious. Because you will never know what that experience is like as a man because you've never been the other. That's the whole idea behind it. So you can't do anything about it until you understand it, and you can't understand it until you're first conscious that it exists and to seek out your understanding around it. So thank you for asking that question. That's very advanced and very good and very timely for the industry. Now, in terms of whether you should put something on the table or not, in case they take it the wrong way or they think it's personal, they think you're having a personal dig or something. If it's to the point where tensions are so high and things feel very personal, so you can no longer put a comment on the table without people saying, oh yeah, but that's you. Of course you're going to say that because you're the head of blah. And they can't separate your contribution from your role. Wherever possible, I would go around the role. You need to get outside of that role and either send other people in to get your messages through because they ain't coming through you as a vehicle. If they've made up their mind about you, they've made the decision about who you are and what you stand for, and they can't hear you, they won't hear you, you may as well face the reality and send other people in. So whether that's someone they trust, someone they like, someone they've never met, but they don't have that push against, maybe they're more willing to hear that from somebody else.